This is the story of Pete Robinson, the guy they called Sneaky Pete, the mad scientist of drag racing, the engineer who proved you didn't need a twin-engine monster to win the U.S. Nationals. If you love the golden age of drag racing like I do, a deep dive into Pete Robinson is about as good as it gets. We're talking about a guy who showed up to the 1961 Nationals with a single small block Chevy, beat cars with twice his displacement, and had officials so suspicious of his elapsed times they refused to announce them to the crowd. I'm going to get into all the good mechanical stuff, the weight-saving obsession, the band inventions, the ground effects experiments that were a decade ahead of Formula One. But before any of that, we have to understand where this guy came from and why he thought the way he did. By the time we're done here today, you're going to know everything you ever wanted or needed to know about the mad scientist of drag racing. Our story begins in earnest in Atlanta, Georgia, where a kid named Lou Russell Robinson, that's his legal name, by the way, not Pete, was born on June 2, 1933. He grew up in Atlanta, attended Georgia Institute of Technology for engineering, and somewhere along the way picked up an obsession with making things lighter, faster, and more efficient than anybody thought possible. Now here's the thing about Georgia Tech. I couldn't find confirmation that Robinson actually graduated. The school records don't show it. He may have attended without finishing the degree, or maybe the records are just incomplete. What we know is he came out of tech thinking like an engineer, and he never stopped. Every problem had a solution. Every component could be lighter. Every rule could be interpreted creatively. Robinson started drag racing in 1950 with a Buick-powered 1940 Ford Coupe in B gas class. Think about that for a second. 1950. The Korean War hadn't even started yet. Television was still a novelty, and this guy is already out there drag racing. He ran that 1940 Ford for 11 years. 11 years! That's not a weekend hobby. That's an engineering laboratory. During that decade, Robinson built his own blower drive system for the Ford. Not bought one, built one. He got good enough at it that he started manufacturing them commercially under the name Pete's Engineering Blower Drives. These kits sold for $249, which was real money back then. He also partnered with Harvey Crane at Crane Cams, and that relationship is worth talking about for a minute. Harvey Crane supplied Robinson's first camshaft. They had a handshake deal where Crane paid Robinson $150 a month to run his cams. As Crane later put it, Robinson was the first racer I ever paid. This wasn't charity. Robinson was obsessive about testing, about feedback, about figuring out why something worked or didn't work. Crane recognized that immediately. And honestly, that $150 a month was about to pay off in ways neither of them could have predicted. So, by 1959, Robinson had spent nearly a decade learning everything there was to know about making a B-gas coupe fast. He towed his car up to Detroit for the NHRA Nationals and didn't do much. Tried again the next year, same story. The writing was on the wall. If he wanted to compete at the national level, he needed to move beyond the coupe. In 1960, Robinson sold the 1940 Ford and ordered a Dragmaster chassis from Jim Nelson and Dode Martin out in Carlsbad, California. He partnered with a guy named Bill Word, an antique furniture refinisher of all things, and they built Robinson's first dragster. The engine was a 283 Chevy stroked to 354 cubic inches, running a 4-inch bore and 3.52-inch stroke. Supercharged, of course. Nothing exotic about the basic concept. But here's where Robinson's engineering brain kicks in. The Dragmaster chassis arrived weighing 1,256 pounds as delivered. Within 3 months, Robinson had gotten it down to 1,120 pounds. He'd removed 136 pounds from a rolling chassis. How? By questioning every single component, by drilling holes in brackets, by replacing steel with aluminum wherever he could, by removing anything that wasn't absolutely essential. Robinson had a saying that pretty much summed up his whole approach. He put it like this: anything that falls to the ground when you let it go from your hand is way too heavy to be on my race car. That wasn't a joke. He meant it literally. He once explained he raced without clothes under his fire suit, just the suit against skin. His reasoning was twofold. It saved weight, and it helped him fit into the seat better. That's the kind of guy we're dealing with here. In the spring of 1961, Robinson shows up at a Southeast Division event in Covington, Georgia, and wins Top Eliminator. Good showing, but nobody outside the Southeast really knew who he was. That was about to change in a big way. the 1961 NHRA U.S. Nationals at Indianapolis Raceway Park. This is drag racing's biggest stage. Robinson arrives with his 354 cubic inch small block Chevy in a car weighing maybe 1,250 pounds. He's going up against twin-engine AADGs running 400 cubic inches per engine, 800 cubic inches total, in cars weighing 2,000 pounds or more. Now, you might think the twins would blow him away, more power, right? But here's where Robinson's engineering brain matters. Force equals mass times acceleration. If you're pushing 2,000 pounds with 800 cubic inches, and he's pushing 1,250 pounds with 354 cubic inches, the math starts to favor the lighter car. Yeah, the twins were faster at the top end, maybe 10 miles an hour faster, but elapsed time wins races, not trap speed. Acceleration is all about power to weight ratio. Robinson's initial qualifying passes were so quick that NHRA officials refused to announce them to the crowd. They figured their timing equipment was malfunctioning. There's no way this little single-engine Georgia car just ran those numbers, right? Wrong. The equipment was fine. The car was just that fast. He beat Tom McEwen in the AADG class final. Then he beat Dode Martin, one of the guys who built his chassis, for overall top eliminator. His low elapsed time of the meet was 8.68 seconds in a gas dragster with one engine against the best twin-engine cars in the country. Harvey Crane later said that as soon as Robinson won the Nationals, his phone started ringing with calls from all over the country. California calls started coming in, which had never happened before. Robinson's win put Crane cams on the national map, and it earned Robinson a nickname that stuck for the rest of his life: Sneaky Pete.
Now, that nickname didn't come from just one thing. It accumulated over time from all the clever, some would say sneaky, ways Robinson found to gain an advantage. The external water injection system he used at the '61 Nationals got protested. Someone thought it was illegal, so Robinson removed it before his final rounds and went faster without it. The miniature parachute is another good one. Rules required a parachute on cars running over 150 miles per hour. Robinson installed a chute about as big as a large Western bandana. Technically legal, practically useless. He just braked the old-fashioned way. For years, he somehow passed tech inspection running a single rear brake, just one disc. How he got away with that, I have no idea, but the inspectors apparently didn't catch it. But the thing that really cemented the Sneaky Pete nickname came in 1962, and this is where things get genuinely wild. Robinson showed up to the 1962 NHRA Nationals with what people would come to call the Jack car. I need to explain what this was because it's one of the most creative and immediately banned things anybody ever tried in drag racing. So picture this. You're in the staging lanes at Indy, and Robinson's car has this mechanical jack stand arrangement at the rear, equal-length jack ends that raise the rear tires completely off the ground using compound leverage. The car sits there at the starting line with its rear wheels in the air. Here's how it worked. With the tires elevated, Robinson would engage the clutch at high RPM. The tires would spin freely, like gyroscopes, building up rotational energy. Those spinning wheels were essentially flywheels storing kinetic energy. Because of centrifugal force, the tires would actually grow slightly as they spun, increasing the contact patch for when they finally hit the ground. Robinson had a single lever in the cockpit. When the green light hit, he released the jacks. The car dropped onto tires that were already spinning at launch RPM. Instead of a violent clutch engagement, instead of tire smoke and wheel spin, the car just launched, like nothing anybody had ever seen. The NHRA announcer, Bernie Partridge's voice, came over the PA system. His tires are smoking and the car's just sitting there. The crowd didn't know what to make of it. Officials definitely didn't know what to make of it. Robinson ran times estimated in the high 7 to low 8-second range for a gas dragster in 1962. The times were so good that NHRA never actually announced them, just like the year before, except this time the reasons were different. They knew the equipment was working fine. They just didn't want to legitimize what they were about to ban. And ban it they did, immediately, right there at the event. The rules were amended on the spot to require that rear tires maintain constant contact with the track surface at all times. The Jack car ran once in national competition and never ran again. Now here's what kills me about this. The engineering principle was absolutely sound. Pre-spinning the tires solved multiple problems at once. It eliminated clutch shock, it allowed Robinson to target his engine's narrow torque band precisely, and it gave him a consistent launch every time. There was nothing unsafe about it. It was just sneaky. Too sneaky. And the sanctioning body decided they didn't like it. Don Garlitz actually wrote an impassioned letter to Drag News criticizing the jack start system, which is ironic given that Garlitz himself pushed the boundaries of the rules plenty of times over the years. But I suppose that's how it goes in racing. An edge is only celebrated if it doesn't work too well. So let's talk about where Robinson went from here, because the jack car ban didn't slow him down. If anything, it just redirected his attention. In 1962, he won the California Gas Championships, won the World Series Top Eliminator, made the semifinals at the Winter Nationals. He set track records at Detroit Dragway with an 8.79-second pass at 170.45 miles per hour. The guy was running hot. By 1964, NHRA had restored the top fuel category, and Robinson started transitioning toward fuel racing. He later explained his reasoning pretty simply. He said he got one sentence of mention in Hot Rod magazine after winning a top gas meet, but 2 paragraphs after running at a top fuel race in which he didn't even qualify. The coverage was in top fuel. The attention was in top fuel. If you wanted to be taken seriously as a national-level racer, that's where you needed to be. That same year, Robinson won Bakersfield as #1 eliminator and set an 8.14-second ET record at Lyons Drag Strip during UDRA's first national event. He was consistently one of the fastest cars in the country, and people were starting to take notice. In 1965, Robinson signed with Ford Motor Company to run the 427 SOC Cammer engine. This came through an executive named Al Turner, and it was a big deal. Factory support in 1965 meant something. It meant parts, it meant money, it meant you could actually develop the car instead of just surviving from race to race. Robinson preferred the Ford Cammer for a specific technical reason. It could run higher safe RPM than other cars in its class. His Ford-based stroker, punched out to around 354 cubic inches, actually came in lighter than the Chevy setup he'd been running, about 50 pounds lighter depending on who you ask. For a guy who obsessed over ounces, that mattered. He also started collaborating with George Montgomery, the gasser icon, on precision magnesium castings. Pete's Montgomery components became known for extreme quality. Those parts are collector's items now. That year, Robinson reached the top fuel final at the Spring Nationals but lost to Maynard Roop. He won a big $10,000 event in Atlanta. He was knocking on the door of a major top fuel national event win, but he hadn't quite gotten there yet.
Before we go any further, I need to talk about Robinson's safety work, because this is where his engineering brain probably saved more lives than his racing ever endangered. In 1967, Robinson was tire testing when something went wrong and he crashed. His arm came out of the car. He needed surgery to fix the damage. Now, most guys would just be grateful to survive something like that. Robinson came out of the hospital with a design for arm restraints, straps that would keep a driver's arms inside the cockpit during a crash. Those arm restraints are now mandatory equipment on every NHRA dragster, every single one. That's not an optional safety item, it's required, because Pete Robinson crashed, got hurt, and figured out a solution. Same year, he introduced a compressed air self-starting system at the Bristol Spring Nationals. The idea was simple: use compressed air from welding bottles to power an aircraft starter motor. No more push starts, no more crew members in the fire lane during eliminations, no more shut-off on the line orders because you couldn't restart the car. That system is also now mandatory in NHRA, AHRA, and IHRA competition, required equipment, because Robinson thought it up and proved it worked. He also developed what he called the helmet pod or brain bucket, a hemisphere-shaped enclosure for the driver's helmet. Slipper clutches were causing violent tire shake, and drivers were getting concussions from their helmets pounding against the roll cage. Robinson designed a 3-point mounted pod that held the helmet in shock-absorbing foam. Bell Helmets built units to his specifications. This is the stuff that separates Robinson from a lot of other racers of his era. He wasn't just trying to go fast, he was trying to figure out how to go fast without killing yourself in the process. 3 of his ideas became mandatory safety equipment that's still used today. How many other racers from the 1960s can say that? All right, so 1966, Robinson finally breaks through at the NHRA World Finals in Tulsa. He runs 7.17 seconds, setting the AA/FD elapsed time record, and beats Dave Beebe for his first Top Fuel national event win. The record stands, the victory stands, Sneaky Pete is officially a Top Fuel champion. He wins the High Altitude Nationals in Denver in 1967, reaches another final at the Spring Nationals but loses to Don Prudhomme. That's actually going to become a theme, Prudhomme beating Robinson in final rounds and elimination rounds. They met multiple times in 1967, 1968, 1969, and 1970, and Prudhomme got the better of Robinson more often than not. By 1967, Robinson had tied Tom McEwen's 6.92-second pass. He was running with the absolute elite of Top Fuel. But here's the thing, Robinson was always thinking ahead, always looking for the next edge. And this brings us to the ground effects experiments. Now we have to take a quick detour to 1968 and beyond. I know, but this is important because what Robinson was working on in his shop in Georgia was about a decade ahead of what Formula One would eventually figure out. In July 1968, in Warner Robins, Georgia, Robinson tested what you might call the vacuum cleaner system. The idea was to duct the supercharger intake underneath the car. As air got sucked up into the blower, it would create a low-pressure zone beneath the car, essentially sucking it down to the track. More downforce means more grip, means faster acceleration. The concept was sound. The execution had a problem. On the first test pass, the system worked exactly as designed and immediately sucked sand, pebbles, and tire debris into the engine. That was the end of the vacuum cleaner approach. But Robinson didn't give up on ground effects. He developed a second system using what he called rubber skirts. Picture a 15-inch wide, 4-foot-long honeycombed aluminum panel mounted parallel to the ground underneath the car. Rubber curtains extended down from the edges, perpendicular to the track surface. These curtains actually brushed against the asphalt. Here's how it worked. As the car moved forward, air got trapped in the enclosed chamber between the panel and the track. This created a suction-like effect that pushed the car down. At testing, the vacuum device supposedly sucked the car down so hard that the rubber curtains were folding over. Robinson claimed it made the tires think the car weighed 2,500 pounds instead of around 1,150. Now think about this for a second. Robinson was running ground effect passes in 1968 and 1969. Jim Hall's famous Chaparral 2J sucker car didn't appear in Can-Am until 1970. Formula One's ground effects revolution under Colin Chapman didn't happen until the late 1970s. Robinson was years ahead of everybody. The early 1970s looked promising. In 1970, Robinson won the NHRA Summer Nationals at York 30 Dragway, beating Jim Nickel and earning $7,250, real money for a privateer. He won the AHRA World Championship at Bristol, beating Jimmy King. He took the AHRA Grand American Series Top Fuel Eliminator title, running a gear drive camshaft system he'd developed after having trouble with cam chain timing in 1968. That gear drive system is actually a fascinating piece of problem solving. Robinson had been having blower explosions and theorized that the 6-foot cam chain was experiencing clearance stack under load. Basically, the chain was stretching and allowing the cam timing to wander. To prove it, he rigged up degree wheels on the camshafts, set up an 8mm movie camera with a strobe timing light, and filmed the whole thing on Harvey Crane's dyno down in Hallandale, Florida. When the film confirmed his theory, he designed and machined a gear system to replace the chain entirely. In January 1971, just 3 weeks before his death, Robinson recorded his career-best elapsed time, a 6.50-second pass at an AHRA Grand American Series event. He was still getting faster, still improving, still pushing the envelope.
February 6, 1971. The NHRA Winter Nationals at Pomona Raceway in Los Angeles County. Robinson's listed driver for the ground effects car was a guy named Bud Dobler, but Dobler refused to drive it. He wasn't comfortable with the experimental system. He didn't trust it. So Robinson decided to drive it himself. He had no sponsor. He was racing out of his own pocket. He needed to qualify to make the 16-car field and get some return on his investment. Earlier that day, Robinson had qualified with a 6.77-second pass, the low ET of the day. The car was working. The ground effect system was doing its job.
He went back out for another qualifying attempt. What happened next has never been definitively determined. Mid-track, something went catastrophically wrong. The chassis twisted. Both front tires separated from their motorcycle rims. Photographer Jair Al-Hadef captured the sequence. You can see Robinson with the butterfly steering wheel turned nearly vertical, desperately trying to move the car left to avoid the guardrail. The steering rods are bowed. The tie rods are severely flexed. His helmet appears to be rising off his forehead from turbulence. The car slammed into the Armco guardrail in the right lane at somewhere around 199 miles per hour. It disintegrated, broke into multiple pieces. Emergency workers and NHRA officials rushed to the scene. The roll cage had protected Robinson enough that he was still alive initially. They transported him to a hospital in Pomona. He died later that day. He was 37 years old. There are two theories about what caused the crash, and more than 40 years later, nobody knows for certain which one is correct. The first theory is that the ground effect system created extreme oversteer or asymmetric forces that twisted the chassis. Maybe the rubber skirts grabbed differently on one side than the other. Maybe the downforce distribution shifted suddenly. Something about that experimental system may have caused the car to do something unpredictable. The second theory is that a rear axle or driveline component failed during the run, power steering the car hard right. The photo evidence shows Robinson fighting to steer left, which would be consistent with something forcing the car right against his inputs. The truth is, we may never know. What we do know is that Pete Robinson died testing something that nobody else was even thinking about. He was pushing boundaries that wouldn't be pushed in mainstream motorsports for another decade. Don Garlitz had something to say about Robinson's death that I think is worth repeating. Garlitz had his own catastrophic crash in 1970. That's the one that cost him part of his foot and led him to develop the rear-engine top-fuel dragster. But Garlitz survived his crash. Here's what he said about Robinson. If he had survived that horrible wreck, he'd be an engineer on some team right now. Pete was always on the edge of the envelope, and I always had respect for him. Pete just didn't stick somebody in his car when he had some idea. He was the test pilot, just like Chuck Yeager or any of them. He took the risk, and there's a lot to be said for that. Garlitz also compared their crashes directly. I did too have a crash, but I survived mine and got to come back and see what I did wrong. Pomona got Pete, and the sport really lost something. Wally Parks, the founder of NHRA, put it this way: who can guess what his fundamental talents might have contributed to today's world? Pete was an innovator whose discoveries were the leading edge of technology. So what's the legacy here? What did Pete Robinson actually accomplish in his 21-year racing career? He won 3 national events in 5 final round appearances. That doesn't sound like a lot until you remember that in the 1960s, there were only maybe 4 major national events per year. The opportunities to win were limited. The competition was fierce. He's ranked number 22 on NHRA's list of the 50 greatest drivers of all time, published in 2001. He was inducted into the NHRA Southeastern Division Hall of Fame as a first-class inductee in 1983. The International Drag Racing Hall of Fame has him too. But the numbers and the plaques don't really capture what made Pete special. This was a guy who spent 11 years racing a B-gas coupe just to learn how things worked. A guy who showed up to the U.S. Nationals with a single-engine car and beat twin-engine monsters because he understood physics better than they did. A guy who invented arm restraints after getting hurt, invented self-starters to make racing safer, developed helmet protection systems to prevent concussions. 3 of his safety ideas are mandatory equipment today. How many racers from any era can say that? And the ground effects experiments? Those still blow my mind. Robinson was running suction-generating underbody aerodynamics in 1968, a full decade before Formula One figured out the same concept. He was that far ahead. Robinson's body is buried at Arlington Memorial Park in Sandy Springs, in Fulton County, Georgia, not far from where he grew up, not far from where he started drag racing with that Buick-powered Ford back in 1950. His daughter Kelly,
Kelly Robinson, later Kelly Robinson Van, was just a kid when he died. Sandra Robinson, his widow, had been married to him for less than 9 years. They'd gotten married on October 27, 1962, at the family home in Fitzgerald, Georgia. Some of his cars ended up at the Don Garlitz Museum of Drag Racing down in Ocala, Florida. The 1971 ground effects car, the fatal one, I couldn't track down exactly what happened to the wreckage after NHRA officials examined it and released it to the family. That information doesn't seem to be documented anywhere, or at least not anywhere I could find. What does survive are the Pete's Montgomery magnesium components, which collectors prize. There's a scale model of the Tinker Toy front-engine dragster available from 1320 Inc. Vintage photos from his career pop up on auction sites from time to time. But here's the thing I keep coming back to. Robinson wasn't just a fast driver. He wasn't just somebody who tried new things. He was something closer to a scientist who happened to race cars. He saw drag racing as his own physics lab, one giant experiment. Every pass was data, every failure was information, every rule was something to interpret creatively. He once said, and I love this, that E.T. won races and extreme speed was dangerous. That's such a simple observation, but it captures his whole approach. He wasn't trying to build the most powerful car, he was trying to build the fastest car. Those aren't the same thing. Power to weight ratio matters more than absolute power. Getting there first matters more than getting there fastest. That's why a 354 cubic inch single-engine car could beat 800 cubic inch twin-engine cars. That's why a 1,250-pound dragster could run with 2,000-pound monsters. Robinson understood the physics when other guys were just throwing cubic inches at the problem. So that's the story of Pete Sneaky Pete Robinson, the kid from Atlanta who attended Georgia Tech and never stopped thinking like an engineer. The guy who ran B-Gas for 11 years and then showed up at the Nationals and shocked everybody. The inventor whose safety equipment is still mandatory today. The mad scientist whose ground effects experiments were a decade ahead of their time. He died at 37, testing something nobody else had the imagination to build. And if you ask me, the sport never quite got another one like him. There were faster drivers, there were guys who won more races, but I'm not sure there was ever another racer who looked at the whole car as a problem to be solved the way Robinson did. Thanks for watching. If you knew Pete Robinson, if you saw him race, if you've got stories or corrections, or just want to tell me I got something wrong, drop it in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Like and subscribe for more drag racing history content. I'll see you on the next one.